we are all going to exit our companies at some point. Why run from it? Let's just call it what it is and then understand its components.
Welcome to Price Discovery, Money and Mindset. Go under the hood with Jordan Rodriguez, a certified financial planning professional and certified exit planning advisor, as he explores the art of balancing wealth with personal fulfillment. We'll hear strategies and stories from industry experts, business owners, and thought leaders about navigating the complexities of high net worth families and businesses. Without further ado, here's Jordan Rodriguez.
Hello, friends, and welcome back. Today's guest is Scott Snider, the president of the Exit Planning Institute and operating partner of Snider Premier Growth, a small family investment company. I really enjoyed today's conversation for two reasons. First and foremost, in his current role, Scott is a nationally recognized industry leader in the exit planning community, but he also takes us through his own experience as a serial entrepreneur and business owner. Without further ado, it's Scott Snider, president of the Exit Planning Institute. Welcome to the podcast. I appreciate you taking the time. You're getting me at my most caffeinated hour of the morning. All of the caffeine that I funnel in early on is finally taking effect. So I think this should be a fun one.
Yeah, no doubt. Me too, brother, for sure. It's like 10 a.m. my time. I'm probably on like the cup number 4 of coffee. So feeling pretty good.
Yeah, I think, coffee and just working hard is a great way to start. You live the quintessential life of an entrepreneur. I follow you on LinkedIn. And if anybody in the audience does as well, I mean, one day you'll be in Washington, the other day you'll be at some conference talking about, the Exit Planning Institute. And I think more recently, maybe about a month ago, you were on a vacation somewhere that looked pretty awesome. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I was down in my favorite place, which is the U.S. Virgin Islands, and more specifically St. John. So what was cool about that trip, though, so one, I got married, so that all happened while I was down there. Right? So
congratulations.
That was the major, thank you. That was the major reason I was down there. But what that turned into, right, we were like, hey, let's just stay down there and let's honeymoon down there and all that kind of good stuff too. So I have 3 kids and all that. So the kids were down there, and then mom and dad, grandparents, right, took them back and all that. But what was cool from a business perspective, I guess, was it was the first time in my entire career that I've taken that much time away from the business. So kind of a big win for EPI, right? Our leadership team kind of stepped into the role. We hosted a full CEPA program without me or my dad, Chris. It's the first time ever that both of us weren't there entirely for the CEPA program, and was able to basically take almost a full month, like February 5th all the way through the end of February. My first day back in the office was give or take May 1st. So it was a good run, and everything moved just like it's supposed to. So it was a very cool time, obviously spending time down in my favorite place for a month, but also being able to come back to a business that was continuing to thrive. It was true value acceleration at work, for sure.
Yeah, if anybody can pull it off, it's got to be the president of the Exit Planning Institute, right?
Well, that's what we say, right? Like I think when our certified exit planning advisors look back at us and they say, look, I'm looking for a case study, or I'm looking for an owner that has done it or is doing it. I said, well, look at us, right? I think a lot of the times our certified exit planning advisors forget kind of how you opened, right? Is that I'm not an advisor at all. I started my first business when I was 16. I had one full-time job when I was a kid, cleaning bathrooms as a janitor, and that was it, right? And so now I'm approaching 40 years old. So I'm about, as to your point, kind of as entrepreneurial or business owner as they come. I'm probably more, even though I can educate them inside of value acceleration, I'm also living it myself.
When I walk into the office every morning, the first floor has a cafeteria, and there's this big sign that says never trust a skinny chef. And I think that really applies to you and the Exit Planning Institute. I mean, you've lived it for decades now. Who better to be at the helm than you?
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. I would say that my book one day, like my dad wrote the Walking to Destiny book, which is all about the methodology. My book one day will be growing up through value acceleration, because I don't really know any other way other than the way dad taught me back when I was 16. So
and when I was reading your bio, so did you not go to college?
Well, I did. I never graduated, right? So
okay.
I went down the traditional route, went to a regular kind of college here and locally here in Cleveland, Ohio, where I'm from. spent about a year there, and I was a decent student, right? I had like a 3.2 or a 3.3 GPA in the first semester. But in the second semester, literally, I was concentrating so much on my business, skipping classes, going to sales meetings, giving out sales proposals, that I literally cut it in half. I went from a 3.3 down to like a 1.75 and lost all my academic scholarships and had to go like, with your head between your legs or your head between to your head down, walking back to dad saying, hey man, I lost all my academic scholarships and I don't want to go to school anymore. Being from like kind of a very kind of perhaps white collar, like collegiate kind of family, I was probably the first to skip out on college. So dad said, we got to go do something. So I owned a landscaping company at the time, and my business partner at the time too, Mike, my longtime childhood friend, I said, look, why don't you go to school for business and I'll go to school for the technical. And so I went down to Ohio State's Agricultural Technical Institute and started a track down majoring in landscape construction and design. Then I hit a wall there because you needed a 6-month internship to graduate. So I completed all the course load. It was a 2-year associate degree, completed all the course load, but then they wouldn't let me intern at my own company. So I tried to get a job at most of my competitors, and they're like, dude, we're not hiring you. You sit at the same bidding table, right? And then I tried to get a job at one of the big national firms, but they use what's called Ohio State's Agricultural Technical Institute, OSU ATI, as a recruiting tool. So they said, okay, we're going to flush you in here. We're going to train you and teach you, and then you're going to go leave to run your own company. Like, that's not for us either, when I could take somebody else that wants to make a career out of working for Valley Crest or Davy Tree or something like that. So anyways, I ended up dropping out of that too. So yeah, and then I after that, I just hunkered down and spent the next maybe 3 or 4 years just 100% all in on building my company. And so we had a good run, really good run.
Yeah, I mean, with the benefit of hindsight, it's a fantastic story, and I think it's really a dichotomy to. I'm not on TikTok, but I see kind of the videos pop up on Twitter of people holding up their degree and kind of crying in the background, saying, I worked so hard, I got this degree, and I'm not earning any money because I can't get a job. And it just goes to show that real life experience is more valuable than a piece of paper. And I think we've forgotten that for some period of time now, but it's coming full circle finally.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of conversation to be had about the future, right? My son's 10 and, he's already thinking about what he wants to go do. And, he's thinking college or no college, and starting to talk to my wife about what do we believe in, right? So it's like, do we push college? Do we not push college? Are the trades coming back, right? If you fast forward another decade, what do we look like? So I think it's certainly an interesting time. But to your point, I think education and an always be learning mentality is super critical in life. And I do think there's a combination of, right, the technical knowledge that we need to absorb, and then the practicality or the application of it as well. And so I think there's a little bit of a blend. And I think to your point, maybe we got a little bit away from the blend of the application, real life experience, and really kind of fallen only into the book.
Right. And the education part's really important. And I know that you were talking about that when you went to Washington. You were invited by the U.S. Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship to testify. I think it was Senator Shaheen. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, Shaheen, yep. Senator Shaheen from New Hampshire.
Democrat, Republican?
Democrat.
Okay. And you got to give, I think, a 5-minute testimony where you took them through the different pillars of the Exit Planning Institute, all the things that you think are important for them to know. Do you think, did you get the sense that Washington understands the state of the small business owner?
Yeah, what a great question, right? So I would say, I think genuinely the interest is there, but do I think the true understanding is there? No. I would say that just from some of the questions that they were asking, so there's 4 expert witnesses, right? There's a panel of 19 senators that are on the U.S. Senate Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee, and then the chair is a Democrat, the majority, Senator Shaheen. Then the chairwoman, the second chairwoman, is a Republican from Iowa, Senator Ernst. And then the Republican Party and the Democrat Party get to nominate 2 people each, right? And they have a 4-person panel. And so the questions that just were directed at me, but were directed at all of their expert witnesses, you could tell that either some of them were either trying to learn, or some of them were just like a little naive, or just a little bit of misunderstanding. I think that you still see today career politicians. So one of the senators had asked me a question, And clearly I was like, my dad's, I could feel my dad, he was sitting behind me, right? My dad sitting behind me, like, please just don't go too hard on these guys. And so me and him couldn't have been polar opposite in terms of career. Like he went to college, right into law school, right from law school, didn't even practice law, right into politics, right? So he entered politics, 25, 30 years old in some
Yeah.
capacity, and has been a senator. He's like 80 plus years old now, and has been a senator, I think, for like 20 something years in some, again, in either state or national. And so to try to talk to a guy that's only been an entrepreneur, right? Another totally different one-sided track. It's hard to kind of, even at me at a younger age, I was like, well, what do you really know about running a business? You've been a career politician. So rather than coming with a more open brain, right, they were kind of directing questions that were, of course, maybe a little bit more politically charged. And so in the sense that, do they really understand what the, micro market or middle market business owner really needs in the United States? No. But what I like about what Senator Shaheen and Senator Ernst are doing is having regular conversation about the needs of business owners in our country. And I think if you can go online and look at it, if you watch the archived version of it, you could see Senator Shaheen opening up in a very well prepared speech that actually dove in some of the statistics that you and I know by being in the exit planning space. So at least for me, you could see that she spent some quality time learning about what the really need is and bringing topics that really do affect the small business owner. So I do like that.
Now, you did a great job of laying out three different pillars, not the exit planning pillars, but three pillars for the committee that you thought were important. It was education, access to coaching and services, and then data and research. What role do you think Washington or the government needs to play moving forward to ensure that there is more preparedness out there?
Yeah, I mean, there's like a kind of one of those like big fat audacious goals that you can kind of lead to that I talked on a sidebar with after the hearing. And then there's some like immediate action. And then kind of did feel a little bit like a broken record up there because I kept preaching kind of just the educational need. And so I just think more access to resources. So most of the companies in the United States, like something like 94% of companies in the United States never surpass $5 million of revenue. So most companies are $5 million of revenue and under. So they're the small businesses that we see up and down the street every single day. They might not have access to resources that some larger lower middle market companies might have. So looking at supporting those types of businesses, I think is absolutely critical. You see this a little bit, I think, in the state of Colorado. So in the state of Colorado, we partnered with the governor's office there to conduct a state of owner readiness research within the state of Colorado, so that they could power fresh education programs that met the business owner's needs. So that's like one direct form of what we could do. I give, certainly, when you asked me the earlier question about, do I think they understand the need? What was nice moving forward is it's about action. Like you just had 4 experts for 2.5 hours sit with you and talk about the needs of business owners. Senator Ernst and Senator Shaheen both are now moving towards conducting statewide surveys in their states, so New Hampshire and Iowa, where they could better understand local needs. So that's kind of putting, some action behind their words. The big audacious goal where I think we could go, and I don't know how it's necessarily done in the United States given just our sheer size, but in Australia, which there are many certified exit planning advisors over there, the government has also recognized the need for exit planning and helping business owners transition and keeping wealth inside of their country, so on and so forth, all the stuff we talk about here. And what the government has done is create like a grant program where they help support the work of advisors and owners who can prove that they're actively planning for the eventual transition of their business. So I don't know if it's exactly like this, but from my understanding, if I hire somebody that's certified, so a certified exit planning advisor, I'm obviously an Australian business owner in Australia, their fees will be subsidized by the government, because the government's saying, look, it's advantageous to the country, to the community, that these businesses transition. We keep employment, we keep taxes, we keep charitable intent, all the stuff that I think business owners help us do. We keep that here in Australia. So that's why I think you see a big spike in certified exit planning advisors in the country there, because if you can prove you're working with a certified professional, it can come. So I didn't introduce that necessarily on the Senate floor, but because I don't necessarily know how we could do that in a country of our size,
Right.
but something like that I think is absolutely critical.
Yeah, and I think it is asking a lot to have these people who largely are career politicians to understand these issues when, if you look at the business owners themselves, a lot of the times they don't really understand the issues. And I think that's reflected in the state of
That's
owner
true.
readiness survey. You guys conducted a countrywide state of owner readiness survey in 2023, which I always think is super interesting. It had been 10 years since the most recent national survey. I noticed a lot of trends. There is still just a general lack of preparedness, but I did think there were shifts in some really positive directions.
Yeah.
Before we get into some of the specifics from your perspective, how have the demographics of owners changed over the past decade if we look at 2023 compared to 2013?
Yeah. So EPI was founded on a book called The $10 Trillion Opportunity, which is really stemmed from this original kind of research that we then turned into the State of Owner Readiness Survey in 2013. Nearly I guess that would be like 8 years later, we formalized it and went out and did a formal study. Back then, we talked about the privately held companies in America were 60% owned by baby boomers, and that equated to about $10 trillion of wealth if they could transfer successfully. Now, what we're looking at is certainly 10 years later, the baby boomers are much older. So here in 2024, the youngest baby boomer is turning 60. So as we move into 2025, all boomers will be 60 years old or older. And now they are not 60% of the market, they are 51% of the market, likely driven by maybe, 2, 3, 4 things, right? So one, certainly the pandemic had an effect on that. So I think that owners are saying, look, I've recovered from the pandemic. Even though I have, as a boomer particularly, have a unique ability to navigate some crisis, do I really want to navigate another one? Because it might take me 2 or 3 more years. So if I'm 65, something happens and I have to rebuild a little bit, it takes me 3 years. Now I'm 68. So we're seeing more owners over the last even 4 years transition at higher rates. And then the next, obviously, biggest market is our Gen Xers. So people 44 years old to 59 years old this year. They own about 43% of the market. So getting, a pretty notable percent. And I think notable because they're much different generationally, characteristically than their baby boomer counterparts. And then the remainder of the market is owned by basically millennials, and then into the next, the Gen Zs and everybody younger. So the market has absolutely significantly changed, which I think is shown, right? When you talked about lack of planning, I would agree. But what was interesting for me as you dissect the data per generation, the baby boomers haven't really moved the needle all that much. Whereas the Gen Xers and the millennials certainly, and talk about my story at the top of your show, they've almost grown up through value acceleration, right? Because 10 years ago, the youngest Gen Xer was 34 years old. So if they're getting exposure to what is exit planning along the way over the last 10 years, they're adopting it more into what they do, and it's changing how prepared they are. So if you dissect that National State of Owner Readiness Survey, you'll see actually that the Gen Xers and the millennials are actually more prepared than their baby boomer counterparts. So certainly a very interesting shift in the market without doubt.
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting piece that you keyed in on. And I think it's almost, that's the reason why that they've been a part of this value acceleration piece. I honestly thought it was a typo when I saw that. I can't remember the percentage, but the percentage ownership that Gen Zers have, what are they, 26 and below?
Yeah,
And it
there's
was
something like, well, per the survey, right? So per our system, that stat doesn't necessarily match the stat in the United States
sure.
makeup. But for whatever reason, right, we surveyed like 1,500 business owners across the United States. There was a perk, certainly a big, to your point, 25-something% of the survey audience was in fact a pretty young Gen Zer, right? So they're the probably youngest people owning businesses in the market today, certainly. And maybe maybe one of the assumptions or theories we could draw from it is that they're probably, if you looked at the millennials, and if they're similar to the millennials, they're more into exit planning than any other generation. And so very naturally, right? I mean, it's really, again, talk about a big long-term goal. If I could get the value acceleration methodology taught in colleges and universities, all business owners, all business executives, business leaders will learn that exit planning is business planning. There's really nothing different, right? It's all the same stuff. So whether when you're 25 years old, just starting your first company, or 16, like I was, we already know what exit planning is, and we already believe in the alignment of business, personal, and financial elements. So can you imagine how strong our American companies could be if we could adopt that mentality?
Sure. And so you touched on something that I guess we'll transition to from the demographic conversation. But when you talk about, a business planning, exit planning paradigm here, can you just explain to the listeners the difference between what you define as a successful company and a significant company?
Sure.
Because I think this is one of the most important components of the Exit Planning Institute's educational
Thank you.
process.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very passionate about it. So again, being an owner since 16 years old, I could tell you I've read, and looking over here, I have a whole bookcase full of different business books that have inspired me along the way. I have an exit planning oriented shelf and then a general business shelf. And when you look at some of those more classic business leadership books and maybe some of the college classes that I took or the seminars that I went to in my early days of owning businesses, none of them really taught me about exit planning and long-term value. But what they did teach me was how to run a successful company, right? A clean balance sheet, a strong balance sheet, a profitable company, lean kind of operations, driving profitable revenue, engagement and entanglement of great customers, attracting and retaining great employees, how important culture is, all of that good stuff as we as professional advisors and business owners know, right? That's what we're always taught. And I think we go out and do that year over year over year over year, right? And next thing you know, we've owned this business for 20 years or more, and we get a potential offer, or we say it is time to sell my company, and we have an advisor come in and do an analysis so that we could move the move the business to market, or start talking to the next generation of owners to sell internally. And we're kind of slapped across the face as an owner because now somebody's called our baby ugly. And the owner's kind of ticked off about it. They're saying, well, what do you mean, man? I make good money. I have great people, long-term employees. I have great relationships with my customers. We run a pretty lean business. I don't have a lot of debt. What do you mean my business isn't worth anything? And that's because they concentrated those 20 years only on creating something that was annually successful and not long-term significant. And what a significant company is for us at EPI is the way we would define it is something that is ready and attractive, highly valuable and transferable at any time, that is aligned to the business owner's business, personal, and financial goals. And so when you think about that, is that although they've had a successful company year over year, they haven't taken any of that intellectual capital and transferred it to anybody else. Likely that owner is still kind of the heartbeat of the company, of the business. And they haven't necessarily documented a lot of process. And they might have a customer concentration issue, all these things, let alone all the personal, financial, and personal things that owners typically lack planning in as well. So they might, in fact, have a great business that provided a nice income, but they have not created a business that is of significance or worth any transferable value. And that's the key, right? That's, I think, going back to educating these 20-year-olds just starting companies, if we can educate them with that mentality, income and value, or the relationship of income and value, again, what strong companies we can have in our country. I think it's kind of a cool time to be in our space.
Yeah, if we double click on that, I think it was also well represented in this survey that business owners are statistically doing a better job of business planning. But you also mentioned a couple other types of planning that they need to be doing that fall outside of the realm of business. And that still, it seemed like it was being neglected just statistically based on the owner readiness survey. Can you give your 2 cents as to why you think that might be?
Yeah, so I think it is a little bit generational too, right? So again, slicing and dicing the survey per generation. And I'm not saying it's bad or good. I think it's actually very natural, and it just is. But knowing that, particularly as owners and advisors, we can help each other kind of learn and grow. But yeah, I think that most owners across all generations are very passionate about their craft, right? Their business. And they spend most of their time likely inside of their business growing it from, again, year 1 to year 20 or whatever it might be for them. And very naturally, they lack 2 key elements: the personal planning, who am I outside of my company, and what do I want to do in life outside of my company, and their personal financial planning. And so starting maybe with that, I think the personal financial planning is actually kind of natural because their biggest asset is their business. If they had any extra money, they're probably investing it in their business. And so they're not necessarily looking at their business yet as a financial asset. They're looking at it as an operating entity that they're trying to grow. And so, and it's rightfully or wrong, depending on maybe what advisor you talk to, the owner does believe that that is their most predictable asset, right? It always has been. If I had an extra 100 grand, I'm going to dump it in my business because it might produce 20 or 25% or 10%, whatever your net profit might be. So very naturally, they're not really thinking about financial planning because 80% of their wealth is tied in their business anyways. The next is they're not thinking about personal planning all that much, particularly the baby boomer business owner isn't thinking about personal planning all that much because, again, if you looked at that particular generation, very natural. So two things stand out when I think about a baby boomer owner and personal planning. One, their core value is success. So whether it is their business, their marriage, their faith, their golf game, whatever it is, they want to feel success in what they're putting their effort within or into. And two, they are the inventors of the 60-hour work week. So a very passionate individual, right? They believe like, let's grind, let's make it happen, right? Like, and I want to take on a lot of stuff myself, right? Like I'm the leader. And I'm not saying that that's bad at all. In fact, there's a lot of the younger generations can probably pull from their
Sure.
very determined and passionate efforts. But nonetheless, if you're thinking about that and that mentality, you're not doing personal planning at all. So when you look at the state of owner readiness survey and you see a little bit of that lack of planning, again, it's getting their percentages are actually getting pulled downward by the baby boomers because the next generations are actually guys like me and you are a little bit more in touch to who we are outside of our career. And so it'll be interesting to see our, call it 30-year-olds to 55-year-old business owners mature and be exposed to things like the value acceleration methodology, because very naturally we kind of look for a work-life balance or blend. We believe in working smarter, not harder, and we value our time. So if you looked again to the state of owner readiness survey, you could see that those younger generations have a little bit better of an outlook on personal planning. I would say across the board, everybody kind of lacks and or can speed up or make a bit more solid their personal financial plans and strategy.
So what specifically is this? I'm going to call it younger generation, but millennials and Gen X, you said they're doing a better job of personal planning, whenever it may be. But do you see anything specifically that they are, whether it's technical or certain types of consultants that they're, whatever it may be, what are they actually doing, boots on the ground, that is making their planning process more, attuned to eventual successful exit?
Yeah, so I think, again, very naturally inclined. I always say that the younger folks are probably your boomerang exit, your boomerang owners, meaning that they're going to grow a company over 10 years and sell it. So I've already had an exit by 24. I'll probably have another exit in my 40s and then, do it again every decade, right? And so very naturally we're inclined. So that kind of forces us, if you will, with that mentality to surround ourselves, frankly, with great advisors. So I also think the younger generations are very open to feedback, open to some constructive criticism, and I think are a lot more open to surrounding themselves with advisors. They're much more hard on their sleeve type people, where I believe baby boomers are a little bit more close to heart. And so I believe the first tangible thing that you can hold on to is since they're more open to feedback along the way, they realize they can't possibly do it all themselves. They know that they want to exit in 10 or 15 years. They don't want to, this business isn't going to define them throughout their entire career. So they're naturally surrounding themselves with really great advisors. And they're surrounding themselves particularly with the two most critical advisors that we feel that owners have, which is somebody that's running the business side of their exit strategy, usually some type of value growth or management consultant, maybe their CPA and part of their advisory services. And then the second person that's really looking around that personal financial path, their personal financial advisor. This is also why I think over the last 10 years, you've seen the personal financial advisor go to not even in the top 5 most trusted advisors to now the number 1 most trusted advisors, let alone all the education and investment they've made in the profession. Naturally, they have an audience in the younger generations that are more inclined to use them because they're closer to exit than ever before. They're not going to hold their businesses for 25 or 30 years.
So what do you say then to and this might not be a fair, but this is just the caricature I see in my head.
Sure.
The 55-year-old kind of bulldog, hard-headed business owner who's been doing it for 30 years and they're 55. They want to do it for a much longer
Another-
period of time. And when you talk to them about exit planning, they say, well, I don't have any plans to sell. There's nothing I need to do here. What do you say to that person?
I would say, in all due respect, you're foolish. Think about it, right? Like all businesses will transact. It's a long-term kind of silly thing that we always talk about, right? You will exit at death. So if that's what you want to do, I guess you're going to die with your business. But I can't possibly think that you're going to really have a sound and well-rounded life. And I just can't possibly naturally think that your health and wellness is going to make you last another 30 years in running your company. Beyond that, I don't actually, that might be one of the stereotypes. I think owners might say that out loud, but they don't actually feel that in their heart. I'd like to think that regardless of age, and particularly actually, maybe not even regardless of age, honestly, maybe if you look at those 55-year-olds up 65, 70, again, they're very passionate in what they do. So they're very proud of what their company that they've built and very proud of their people. So I would say to them, I think you, as a business owner, we've kind of signed up to have an obligation for other people. I think actually many business owners are servant leaders. And so, I mean, if you have no exit strategy, shame on you, because what happens to all the customers that buy product from you or services that help power their businesses? What's happened to all the people that work for you? What's happens to all the advisors that surround you? What happens to your community, the charitable intent, the taxes that power the community that you're within? If you're so selfishly sitting there saying like, I'm not going to, I'm my business, I'm not going to exit it. Like, I'm just going to have it forever. It's shame on you, because I think that business could transact, and it should transact, because it's likely powering a very successful thing right now that does benefit for many entities, organizations, communities, or people. Beyond that, I would say 50% of our exits in the country today are involuntary due to what we know as the 5Ds, right? A death, a disability, a divorce, whatever that might be for you. And so, man, you could be 55 years old and 57 years old, you die from cancer, and your business is left in shambles and now shuts down. What a shame, because your business is likely your largest asset. So if you are married with kids, what are they going to do upon your death if your business has to shut down? Because likely it's also your largest income generator. So knowing that, is that enough to help you plan for the next phases or acts of life and business? I'd like to think most owners are like, man, I guess I never really thought about it that way, because I think a lot of us, right, we're like Superman. Nothing's ever going to happen to us. And so we're, that's why I think a lot of times in that same survey that you referenced, the State of Owner Readiness Survey, you see business owners agreeing that transition strategy is important, but they're not doing much about it, because although it's important, it's not urgent, because they're pushing it down the line. But nonetheless, yeah, I think that some of the people that are really business oriented or focused that have been planning, those 55-year-olds and older, I think have a bigger obligation that they might not just be aware of yet.
No, you might get a little bit mad at me for this one, but you even referenced it earlier when you said business planning and exit planning are one and the same. Do you think part of the hangup might just be the name? We're going to these people and talking about exit planning, when in reality, they're not necessarily looking to sell to a third party, whatever they see a sale as.
Right.
Do you think that could be part of the hesitancy?
And I could tell you that this has been since we bought EPI in 2012. People wanted us to change our name to the Value Acceleration Institute, not the Exit Planning Institute. And I'm still perhaps hard-headed on this a little bit. I believe that the exit planning isn't some like bad word that we should run away from, right? The fact of the matter is, whether you sell to your son or daughter, sell to your employees, do an ESOP, sell to your management team, or sell to a private equity firm or a strategic buyer, we will all exit our company, right? So we might call an internal sale a succession. We might call an external sale an actual exit, whatever it might be. I think, what you're saying is absolutely true. And it's one of the things that you'll see the Exit Planning Institute combat a little bit here in 2024, something that I actually discussed a little bit at the Senate as well. People still today don't really understand what exit planning is, right? So unlike maybe some professions that have been, around for 50 years, like financial planning, like the certified financial planner credential, they've been around since, 1972, and their credential came around, I think, in 1985. There's a foundation for what we believe general successful investment planning is, but we're still evolving in the exit planning space. So there's not necessarily a one look. I think if you just Wikipedia exit planning, I'd probably disagree with half the stuff that's on there. And so that's one of the things in the age of the internet, and you can Google search exit planning, everybody's still coming at it slightly different. And so I do believe that the methodology that we've created, or that my dad created 2008, 9, and 10, in his own practice has become a good foundation for where we're going. It's a matter of kind of carrying that torch and really defining what exit planning truly is. But yeah, nonetheless, regardless of whether you're internal or external, we are all going to exit our companies at some point. So just why run from it? Let's just call it what it is and then understand its components.
Yeah. And in the curriculum and coursework, you guys describe it as a paradigm shift. And I really do think that is a great terminology to use, because a lot of people just have never considered that it's one and the same, and that this is something that will inevitably happen, which so you're part of the generation that has grown up in it. You've lived in it. In addition to just being it, you're the face of exit planning in the United States right now. As a business owner, what's been the most difficult part of the business and exit planning process for you in any of your businesses?
What a great question, man. What a great question. Yeah, I would say I also think it's timely in my business. So if you looked at I'll say for me and Dad, because we're interesting, because we're business partners. Dad is 51%, I'm 49%. Dad is 65 years old, I'm 40 years old. So we're at two different kind of spots in our career as well. So it's interesting to have a business owner a partner that is 20 something years older than you. But Dad has put a lot of effort lately, which has affected our partnership too, both from a struggle and from a positive standpoint, in estate planning and personal planning. He is kind of your traditional boomer from the sense of trying to figure out who he is outside of business and family. I would say that as his son, Dad has invested time in two things in his entire life: his family and his career. So being decentralized from our business today, it's a struggle for Dad, because he's like, do I like golf? Do I like fishing? Do I like travel? Do I like going to music shows? He's like, I've never had this much time, because it's family and business for me, these two things. For me, I would say that it's primarily the biggest struggle that I have today as an owner in my business is decentralizing myself from the company at what I would consider a relatively young age. And knowing that along the way, mistakes will happen that cost me money.
Sure.
But I have to make sure that we're able to make those mistakes so that my leadership team can learn and grow. Again, I think we've done a really nice job of decentralizing Dad. The next step for me is decentralizing myself, but while my business is growing. So we have about 35 employees here at EPI. And the biggest thing, if there's any owners or executives listening now that have grown a company like this, my office faces the parking lot and the front door of our business. And we onboarded 2 new employees just the other week. We have a tradition here that we take them to like an extended lunch, right? We take them to like a 2.5, 3 hour lunch where we get to know each other. We go to like one of those restaurant and bars that has like bar bowling or shuffleboard or something, where we can kind of cut loose from the formalities and get to know our new people. And it's something that I put into the business when we had our 5th and 6th and 7th employee. But now at the 35th employee, I look out and I'm like, why is everybody leaving? There's like 8 people walking out of the office. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're doing the traditional lunch. And it's the first time in my business that I didn't get the invite. I'm like, what the hell? But it's such a huge transition for me in that port of decentralization. It's really not about Chris and Scott Snider anymore. It's about the next generations of leaders. So just kind of getting right with that has been that's the first thing that kind of comes to mind in both my business and relating it to the exit planning journey, is really stepping back from the business and in letting our employees kind of power who we are and what we do today. But that's probably my biggest struggle. I'd like to think that I have a decent financial plan for a young guy. I'd like to think that I'm pretty well rounded inside the personal planning. It's truly, how do I begin to truly look at how are the things that we're doing today relate to value? And my journey through decentralization would probably be this over the last rolling 12 months, probably some of the most awkward moments for me, for sure.
Sure. I think that's probably pretty common. The decentralization is key. If I had to, put it in order, that's probably the hardest part. Well, one of the questions I'm asking everybody who comes on, and I've got investment bankers, I've got financial psychologists, I've got the president of the Exit Planning Institute. What is a common misconception among business owners that you'd like to set the record straight on?
That's such a great question too. So I would say I go back to my servant leader concept or comment. I would say that I think sometimes, especially larger companies, maybe north of $5 million in revenue, whether it's employees or community or outsiders looking in, that they're kind of hard numbers like hard-nosed, driven towards profitability. And I think that if you really take a step back, many business owners are really servant leaders inside of their communities and inside of their own business. And I think that if you look at what business owners do for the country, for the world, I think that's one of their stereotypes, is that we're really focused on profitability at the expense of people. And I think that it's truly the other way around. I think many business owners know and feel that their success is because of their people and not at the expense of them. So that would probably be one common misconception or stereotype that I think business owners get in today's world.
Sure. Sure. Well, in the show notes, I'm going to link Exit Planning Institute content. I'm going to put your LinkedIn and everything. Is there anywhere that you would suggest listeners go to read more, to hear more, to learn more?
Yeah, I would say just two simple ones. Again, show notes too. So earncepa.com. So if you go to earncepa.com, you can see everything Exit Planning Institute. CEPA is CEPA. The other one, if you're interested in all the research that we talked about, just go to ownerreadiness.com. See the national stuff, and you can see the one from 10 years ago, and then all kinds. You have about 15 regional surveys in there as well. There might be one in a state that you're living within. And I would say, yeah, always follow me on LinkedIn. I try to actually showcase my journey as a business owner there. So if you tune in to my LinkedIn over the next few weeks, we're going to Martinsville, Virginia for the NASCAR race. So that's where I'll be this week. And I always like the exit planning stories there. So if you are a follower of my LinkedIn, there's a lot of transition going on inside of the auto racing community right now, and those businesses that are in there. So that's always kind of a cool thing to watch.
Well, I'll be following along. Scott, I appreciate you taking the time today.
Cool. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Price Discovery Money and Mindset is brought to you by Wernick Wealth Managers and Chagrin Valley Business Strategies. Opinions expressed by Jordan and guests are their own and do not represent investment advice, solicitation, or the like. For more information and resources referenced in this episode, be sure to check out the show notes. Thank you and see you next time.